Clock's counting down, so let's begin. Hello and welcome to Dynamo for Revit, baby steps for the non-genius. Of course, geniuses are welcome. In fact, we need you, and I see a couple in the audience, so just be warned that it is baby steps. We're going to do some very simple, practical examples here to really build the confidence that you need to get going with Dynamo. My name is Jay Polding, and I'm a registered designer in Ontario, Canada. And I also work for SolidCAD Solutions, an Autodesk reseller. And basically, like when I boil down what I do, I just try to help design professionals stay profitable, stay happy, stay sane using BIM workflows, BIM technologies. And I have another thing that I'm very proud about too. That's why I called it this. I'm a non-genius, and tackling Dynamo for the first time was pretty daunting. So I'm glad I can allay that a little bit. I'd like to have Haney introduce himself. He's our resident genius as well. So.
My name's Haney Uemura. I'm a director of digital practice for KPMG Architects, and basically what the part you're probably more interested in about is I do a lot of Dynamo scripting for my office to streamline processes. I do simple things from pushing data from one parameter to another up to unrolling an elevation using Dynamo. I got it myself. It was very daunting at first when I first started using Dynamo, but it became a toy after a while where, it became fun to use, actually, once you knew how to use the tool. So here I am.
Thanks. So key learning objectives here. By the time we're done the 60 minutes, you're going to be able to know basically when to use Dynamo and when it's not so useful, perhaps. Install Dynamo, simple things. Nodes, what are nodes? Terminologies. Of course, we're going to make some graphs live from nothing. And that terminology is a big thing. So it's also in the handout. There's a glossary of terms. And we'll talk more about that as we go. So when is Dynamo ideal? Let's start with the negative and then go to the positive. Distributing a Dynamo graph or script to many people without training is probably not the best idea. If someone's having trouble maybe even using Revit and then you throw a Dynamo script at them that they have to open and manipulate, it's not always ideal for that, although it's getting better, and Autodesk is working on improving that one-click workflow. Large multi-step routines. I think the message here is if you're going to do something very complex, something very intricate, just use the API. Hire a programmer and have them do something in the API. One of the reasons is because Dynamo runs one graph at a time, and it tends to be very linear. So you have to do this, then this, then this. You can't do A, D, B. It has to be very linear. The other thing here is tracking live information. So you might have like a Dynamo graph that's tracking rooms. But can you run one that's tracking doors and tracking sheets all at the same time? No, not yet. So those are some of the negative things. Let's get to the positive things. And automating, like this is basic stuff here, automating something that is repetitive and takes a long time, number one. So something we're going to do today is fill out a room information using Excel. Also making views, it's great at that. It's a very tedious task in Revit, but Dynamo makes it better. Copying information from one place to another, you'll see that when we do a filled region area, we take the area and then put it into another parameter which you can schedule. And this is, okay, Haney and I kind of maybe disagree a little bit on this, but he has his input on this.
Well, my take is, yes, your statement here made and used by one person. I think that's how I started off as well. It became a thing that I did for myself to streamline my process. But as I found these created these graphs, I like sharing with the others. So now we have an actual library of Dynamo graphs. Sorry, I keep on using the word script. Graph is the proper term. But now it's shared by everyone in my office, not just by myself.
Yeah. So yeah, so you can share them. Don't want to discourage that, but initially it's really good if you personally see a need and then you fill it. Installing Dynamo. Just some basics on this, since we're starting from the beginning. Most of the time it's installed in your like Revit 2017 and up, it's just there. But if you don't have it or you don't have the latest version, go to that link up there. It's in the handout in the data set. Okay, well, we're going live here. So we're going to do a number of live demos. We're live streaming. Hello to whoever's watching right now, and including my family. I have to shout out to all of them.
Then I got to do too. Hello, family.
Yeah. My son, he's actually really good with Revit. He's 13 years old, and he probably could have done a session here. Anyway, so puts me to shame. But anyway, I've got a blank file here. I'm going to open up Dynamo, just like that. Right away, it might throw you off. That's showing you that I have two versions installed, an older one and a newer one. And I'm going to go with the newer one. The newer ones are more stable now, so just go with the newer version. Sometimes if you make a graph/script, Dynamo script or graph, if you make it in an older version, when you upgrade it, because it's somewhat young software, there might be some issues. But generally, it's been getting much more stable. So here we are. This is Dynamo. And this right here, I remember when I first started, I was like, okay, what am I doing here? Like, am I making a new node? Or what's a custom node? Well, you're actually making a new graph. That's the terminology that they use. And then this area right here is called the canvas. And all of these things in here, that's where all of the nodes or commands are. That's where you can find them. So first thing that we're going to do, really simple, we're making a wall. I guarantee you can make a wall faster just in Revit alone, but this is just to do something, just to get started, right? And that's what I needed when I first got started. So I type search, I look for wall. What do I get? I get a whole bunch of nodes that have the word wall in them. And I'm going to be doing this one right here. It's by curve and levels. You might not have noticed this. It's kind of subtle. But down here at the bottom of the screen, it says automatic. That's bad. So let's go to manual. If Revit crashes, Dynamo crashes. If Dynamo crashes, Revit crashes. That little thing right there is like a little crash machine. So just make sure that it's on manual.
Okay. Maybe we should explain why automatic is bad, because in this example that we're giving right now, yeah, maybe it's not a bad thing because it's such a light file right now. But when you start pushing a lot of data into the actual graph and it's automatic, and if you make one change, thing will spin, 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 it might even crash. So it's best practice to actually go through the manual as opposed to automatic.
Yeah, right here. So I'm going to continue on with walls here. So this is a node. That's kind of like a command. At the end, it's going to create a wall. And then you've got these different inputs right here. So like you've got wall type. That kind of makes sense. And then right here, wall types. Okay. So it's looking for a wall type from the Revit file that I'm in currently. Or if I open another Revit file, it'll look for the wall types in that file. And it gives a list right here. I'm going to pick just a conventional wall type. And then I wire it to that. So now that part of it has been done. Just take a quick note of this right here. Notice how there's like a lightning bolt. What that means is it's getting something from Revit, like a setting, and then it's bringing it in to Dynamo to use, like the wall types. Next thing we're going to do is look for levels. So there's a level. And then it's getting the levels. So that's good too, a little lightning bolt. So level 1's where it's going to start. This is the height of it. Then I'm going to do another level.
One thing about the level is that it's actually reading your Revit file. So if you actually have 10 levels in your Revit file, you will see a list of 10 there. It automatically reads your actual Revit file, automatically, even though it's set to manual.
This right here is kind of frustrating. You know, when you're learning something, I remember being really like a roadblock right here. What is a C? And then I hover over it and it says curve. Okay, curve. So I go in here and I type curve. No, no curves. Why? Because the term curve is a kind of a programming term that they used, and it really means line, arc, or a combination of lines and arcs. So we're going to use line. We're keeping this really simple for our first baby step. I'm going to plug the line into there. Okay, can we run it yet? No, not quite. See, you could have drawn the wall already, but still, we're learning something as we go. Start point, end point. What is that looking for? A point. Okay, will it find it? Kind of, yeah, there it is right there, point. So I click on that, and what that is doing, that little plus sign, it's actually adding a point back into Revit, or it's using that point. So that's going to be the start point, and then it's asking me for a point again. That's the end point. Okay, so what is the point looking for? We're almost done. It's looking for X, Y, and Z. So 0, 0, 0, and 0, 0, 0. That's not really going to make anything, right? So what we can do is just fill out one of these. 0, 0, 0 is the coordinate point. That's like in AutoCAD, 0, 0, 0. That's where it's starting. Where is it ending? What is it looking for here? Oh, a double. Everybody knows what a double is, right? No, I didn't. So a double, I type in double. Oh, okay, it doesn't say double. It's looking for a number. And if I type in number, that is a double. All of these things, or some of these things, are explained in the glossary. So I'll just type this out. This might look like a really big number to you. I did some of this in metric, so you can do it in imperial as well. It works in both.
And just to keep in mind, inside the Dynamo environment, it's unitless. So when you type in 10,000, it's actually 10,000 Dynamo units. There are nodes out there that could actually convert these units into imperial or metric units.
Yeah, convert between units. Yeah.
Right.
You would just put in if it was a decimal factor, you'd put in a decimal feet an inch factor for that. So I'll just keep going here. We're going to questions are great, and just shout them out, and we'll take more questions at the end too, just because of the time constraints, because of the live streaming.
And we have to remember to repeat their question because the people live can't hear their questions.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Remind us if we forget to.
Okay, I'm going to run this, okay? So let's just see what happens. Run. Yay! Okay, so there in the background, you can see there's a couple points, which we made. There's the line connecting those points. And for the big finale, a wall. Oh, man. So that was like a
guys. Okay, good night.
Yeah, sarcastic clapping. It's great.
The one thing I want, can you go back to your Dynamo graph?
Yes, sir.
The one thing I want you to notice is that he actually started from his end node and kind of worked backwards. That's my strategy. I tend to go with, okay, where do I want to end off? And that's what I put in first, and I work backwards from there. So it's sort of like an assembly line, but you're assembling it backwards in a way. I find I get better results that way.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Okay, back to the PowerPoint here. So we're going to review a couple points from there. So always set your running to manual. Remember to save Revit and Dynamo before running the graph. There's some symbols there. I talked about the plus sign. That adds, let's say, a wall. The lightning bolt gets something from Revit, like a setting. The question mark gets like some information, like a parameter or something from Revit. If you want to search, you can right-click on the canvas as well. Next one, we're going to make this, Auditorium Seating. So I'm going to go back here and start with this. You'll have all of these files. They're all in the data set, and you can download those and try it out yourself with the instructions are there too. So I'm going to launch Dynamo again. So each time we're going to start from scratch. What's interesting about this, it's not just making an auditorium seating. The purpose is so you can see that you can place families at coordinate points and do a whole bunch all at the same time. And that kind of might open up some possibilities for you on what you can do. So I'm going to click New. And just, again, starting from scratch here, I'm going to type in family. and by point. Okay, so there it is there, family by point. That's kind of like the end node. That's the result. Yeah, that's it. Before I forget, let's put that to manual. Okay, so what is it requesting here? Like I've got, this is what it's going to make, a family or a bunch of families placed by point. So let's go with point. So when I type in point by coordinates, same as the last one we did, plug that in. Don't really need to do anything else right yet. Those doubles or numbers are set to 0. Family type, let's put that in. Family type. Oh, thank goodness it's the first one on the list. So there it is there. I can look for this one. This is a chair.
And once again, it's looking in your actual Revit file for all the family types right now. It's populating that list.
And this could be open on any Revit file, but if that family's not there, it'll give you a little error. So just be aware of that. When you're practicing this, you might want to choose either this file or you can use the sample files I've given you. So I just made a quick little family. Then it's just a simple chair, but it can move up in the Z direction. All right, so let me just run this and see what we get. So no clapping necessary. That's placed the family at 0, 0, 0. Which at first you're like, okay, what big deal? But you can't do that in Revit. Like you can't actually place something at a coordinate point. So just think about the possibilities there. Now let's place a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to make a sequence. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to make a sequence of numbers. And I'm going to plug that in there. The start, the amount, and the step. I'm going to interpret this in a second. But really, it's looking for a number or a letter. In this case, it's a number that we're looking for, so I can type in number, and there's my number, and plug that in there. And then I'm going to do a Control-C, Control-V on the keyboard, and that'll do a copy-paste. Control-C, Control-V, and there to there. So I need to fill these out. So starting at 0, how many chairs do I want in the X direction? I'm going to say like to 10 to start. And then what's the spacing between the chairs? I'm going to go like 450. And again, apologize, that's in millimeters. You can use, that could be inches or decimal feet if you'd like as well. So that's doing that. Let's run that. So just run that little baby step. Okay, cool. So we've got bunch of chairs. If we were to change this to like 15, okay, it did it. Yeah, it added them.
Maybe you should show them, set
like
it to automatic. No, why don't you set this, because it's relatively light, so if you automatic, you could actually see it automatically updating the Revit model. Can you actually tile?
Just turn on the automatic crashing setting.
Yeah.
So okay.
It is a live demo after all.
Sure, yeah.
Add some excitement, I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So let's go with 500. And I'll click off of that.
So there you go.
And then it's stretch. You got to keep your eye on that. Okay, I'm going to just put that back.
I saw it beat its way.
So, okay, so that's the X direction. I'm going to do a couple of things. This is like best practice as you're writing your graphs. I'm going to take all of that information, right-click, and then create a group of that. And then in the group, I'm going to call that chair layout. And I double-clicked in order to name it. And then I can Control-C, Control-V again, and it copies the whole group, so that can be a big time saver. And I'll copy that to there. So this is the kind of stuff I needed. Like just simple, copy one thing to another, and then it's like makes some logical sense. Except, let's run it. Like I was so excited, and then, what? Like, shouldn't it just do both directions? And no, you know lacing, right? Everybody knows lacing. I had no idea I still don't know what this is. But I do know. If you click on cross product and you run it, you get that, which is better. Spacing is wrong, so we can change that right here. So I'll just go with 1500 and run that. You'll see that behind it spaces out. So that's really just like a little baby step and to placing families in a particular location and then arraying them. So again, the little trick to that was right-click, go with lacing, and then cross-product.
And you know how you group them and there's a green thing around the actual bunch of nodes? We actually use that in our office for our Dynamo standards. So like any user input, those are in a pink color. And anything that's process-driven, which they shouldn't touch, it's in a gray area. So that's like a do not touch. And then I have a different color for output. So it's just so the user knows where to go when they input information into the Dynamo script. We use these colors.
So this right here, it says number, but really, if you were to just open that from nothing, you'd be like, number of what? Like, what does this mean? So if I double-click on that, I go to number, and I'll just call that one start point. I'm putting it in brackets because I'm just going to do one more, and I'll explain. So I'm a guy, I can't multitask. So there's number. What is that? Number of chairs? Yeah. Okay, close quotes, or close whatever those are. So what that's doing is it's just anyone who opens this further, they understand what that input will do, but I'm leaving this because if it's just 15, what is that, like a number, a double, an integer? Nobody knows unless you leave the original name there. Okay, well that's it for that one. There's a more elaborate example of this where you can control the angle in the z coordinate. That you can, it's part of the...
So yesterday I was in the advanced Dynamo workshop, and they brought this one step further. They actually, it was stairs, like stadium style, and download the, did you talk about the package managers yet?
No.
No, okay, I'll get to that. Once you do, I'll tell you what to download. Everything that I got, the data set, you guys could have as well, because we'll explain that later. But the seating arrangement, we were able to go in the X, Y, and Z, put a person on stage, and then rotate the stair based on the actual location of the person standing on the stage. So it was pretty incredible what we were doing yesterday.
He said Z.
Sorry, Z.
We're trying to suppress that. We're from Canada, sorry. Okay. And then we apologize.
Another one is data and data.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So if you close and reopen a Dynamo graph, this is a big question. If you close the graph and then open it, you don't have to use the exact same file with the graph. You can use it for any file with some exceptions, but basically it doesn't have to be with that one Revit file that you use. Same thing with the other part of this is those chairs, there's nothing special about them. You can delete them, you can add more, you can change them. But if you open the graph again and you run it again, it's going to affect the chairs it did last time. So if I deleted a whole bunch of the ones I did, ran it again, it would just put them back in. But if you just ran it once and then never ran it again, they would just be standard chairs. Consolidate nodes if possible. I didn't do that where that 0 is. Like if you have a bunch of things that are reading one piece of information, you just do it once and then wire it to two things. Save some time. And then I talked about that too, we talked about groups as well, so group your common elements. Big thank you to the Dynamo forum. There are some real geniuses, but really helpful, nice people on there who will help you through it. And I'm on there too, and it's a good community to help out. So it's right on the Dynamo site.
One word of advice, and I learned it the hard way, don't expect to go to the Dynamo forum and say, I have a problem, can you guys solve it? They'll be like, we're not going to do your work for you. Yeah. They want you to make an attempt. If they see you make an attempt, they will help you. I've just seen that so many times in the past.
This is reading and writing. So reading from Excel and writing to Excel. This is a big thing that Dynamo does. And Dynamo's going more and more this way, interoperating with lots of different software. But for now, Excel is what we're going to focus on. So I have a file here, and just that standard one that you get from Autodesk. And it has rooms. And in the rooms, there's the name of the room, and then there's the floor finish. And let's say you're working with someone who uses, I'm just going to get Dynamo running here, who doesn't use Revit, doesn't have a C to Revit, but they use Excel. So you can have that person, you can send them a list of things, they can fill it all out in Excel, and then you can bring that back and fill out that information in Revit. We've got Excel, we've got Dynamo and Revit. I'm sorry if I start mixing up software names. I've probably done it already, but you can interface between all of those. So start from scratch. Right away, I'm going to look for Excel. And this is pretty good because they come up first and second. This is reading from the file. Set that to manual. Write to file. And if you were kind of doing this for real, like in practice, I think I'd split the two processes up. So I would say, write it out, one Dynamo graph. Read it, another Dynamo graph. But we're going to just do it all in one for right now. Okay, so this is the first one. We're going to write. We're going to create the list first. So number one, it's asking in the input, file path. I think we're good there. File path, it's pretty literal. Sometimes when you put spaces or not, it changes the search. I'll do my best to explain when that happens. So wire it to there. Browse, that's like pretty universal. I'm going to go here to this file. I think I've already got some stuff in that file, but it'll work. It's an Excel file. If you don't specify a file, if you just specify the folder, it'll create the Excel file for you. Okay, sheet name. More terminology here. String. Everybody knows what a string is, but what is a string? It's another programming term for text, sort of anything that's not a number, but usually it's text. That's the main idea here. If I type in string, then I'll go to there, and I'll plug that in. Sheet name, think Excel. Okay, so what's the first sheet name? Sheet 1.
It is case sensitive, so.
It is case sensitive,
so.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go with sheet 1. I think in the practice I was doing sheet space 1, but we'll just go with that. Now it's looking for numbers. This one, I always kind of get a little confused at this because they say the row has A, B, C. I thought it was the columns, but anyway, I'm probably wrong. But the point of this is when Revit counts stuff, like, oh, there's like 5 things there. The first one is 0. It's just the way it is. So if I go here to number, the first thing or the first row and column, like top left-hand corner of the Excel, is 0, whether that's A or 1. It's just the first one. So.
And you'll notice that if there's 5 items in Dynamo, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It starts 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, just so you know.
Okay, so next thing, so that was, I would say that's kind of the easy part. Browse to the file, put the sheet name in the start rows. Now we've got to get some data in there. And what are we going to get? Well, this is like a common, we'll call it like a riff, something you do over and over. You're going to look for categories, and then you're going to look for all elements of category. Those two things go together all the time. In fact, they should just be one node, but they're two. So I'm going to look for rooms, all the categories and subcategories that Revit has.
It's a long list.
Long list, but there's rooms. Then, it sort of seems like you're really having to be explicit with what you tell Dynamo, but remember, when a computer learns something once, it always knows it. So if I go here, rooms, what am I looking for? I'm looking for parameters. Get parameter. Okay, got it. So that's going in there. What parameter? What is that? That's a string. Okay, I'm going to start doing something that speeds things up a bit. Double-click on screen. A string is anything I put in quotes. So when I double-click, I can make these things called code blocks. And then quotation mark. What am I looking for here? Name. That's the Revit parameter from the room. So if I let me run it really quick. I should have a list right here of all the rooms in that particular project.
Maybe you should explain what you just did, the whole pinning.
Yeah, pinning, I can pin that or unpin that, and it just gives me my list.
So it stays on your screen at all times.
Yeah. Okay, so I got that. That's the data. So I'm going to plug the data into the data. And then I'm going to run, and we're going to see what happens here. Excel is launching, and ta-da. If I were to just delete that and save it, I'm just going to try this one more time and run it. Okay, what? Nothing happened. This is a little tricky thing that they do here. It's called Boolean. They love that word. They use it a few times. It means like a check, yes or no, true, false, on, off. By standard, that's false. So I'm going to just do the opposite. And, oh, that worked good. Okay, so now, and I might have to flip that switch back as I go here. In fact, I do. I'm just going to save that, and we should be good. Now it will connect, no problem. So now what we're going to do is read from the file. So remember the story, the person doesn't have Revit, they're filling out an Excel spreadsheet, they go to here, and they go like this, hardwood, and just scroll that right down, fill down, save it, and they've done their job. Okay, cool, now I need to get that. It's my job. So the first thing here is file. Oh, cool, I can just plug that in right to there, right? No. So another little thing I guess you just learn over many hours of trying to figure it out is, hopefully I save some time here. It's called file from path. And what that does is it provides like a little buffer. So you have to do this. You've got to browse, you got to file from path, and then you've got to plug that in. So it's like a little buffer. So what am I reading? The sheet name. Can I use or reuse the sheet name? Yes. Good. Run that right now. Let's just see what we got here. Okay, we got stuff. We brought the information back into Dynamo, not in Revit yet. So we've got a bit more work to do here. And I'm going to do this thing called get item at index. What I'm doing here, it's very, very common. So it's not like these are just some random nodes, one of 1,000 that you'd use. This is actually a very common thing that you'll do. You'll do this over and over. So once you get this, it tackles a lot of things. Okay, so get item at index. I'm just going to use this thing called levels and the index. So brief explanation. Dynamo loves lists, and it makes these lists. And this list, see how that says 0 list, and then it has a couple items on it, and then 1, and it has 2 items. We want to consolidate that. We just want like number 1, number 1, number 1, number 1. So what I'm going to do is put in a number, double click. I just need to type the number in a code block, just the number 1, no quotation marks. And then when I run that, we got it. So it was L2, and I don't always know what that is. I just kind of keep experimenting. So like L1, L2 until I get what I want.
Well, that's, if you go back, if you zoom into this space right there. Right there.
Okay.
Can you zoom in?
Yeah.
See the L1 and L2?
Yeah.
That's what you're reading right there.
Oh, cool.
So.
Okay. That's why I brought a genius. Okay. Run there. So there it is there. So we've got the information, what we want, that's great. We're going to plug that back into the room now. So I'm going to go to, remember how this said get? Get has an evil twin called set. So you can go to set parameter, and it like does the same thing. Instead of getting the parameter, it sets the parameter in Revit. So I'm going to get the same element or elements. That's right here. Remember, those are all the rooms. It takes a bit of practice to do this for sure. Don't feel like, it might be a little bit like spaghetti right now, which, we didn't want to do, but you will get this with a bit of practice. So there's the elements. The parameter name that I'm setting the parameter to, it's a string, and that is the floor finish. So spelling and uppercase, lowercase has to be dead on, which is, like if I click on that right there, that's the floor finish parameter that I'm going to write to. I'm going to overwrite ceramic, hopefully. And then I'll do that and run. And it feel like it worked. Okay, so that worked. So that's hardwood. So now all the rooms you've just plastered it with hardwood. And you can go back and forth with that. So that's the idea. You can bring in the other people into the workflow, Excel people.
And you probably might be thinking, it's like, okay, I could probably do this in Revit already, right? We're just showing you concepts of how we could push and pull information from another software into Revit. An example that I used, pretty much the same workflow in my office, was there's a person put the value in the wrong parameter. and there was over 5,000 rooms or whatever. And she's like, oh man. So now I literally use that workflow to push that information from one parameter into another, just using this Dynamo graph. So Dynamo actually fixes mistakes if you wanted to.
So I think that we just have 1 or 2 points here from that last example we did. I didn't say this, but it's true. Dynamo is, like I didn't say it during the example, but Dynamo is view sensitive. So if you're in like a schedule view or an isometric view, or not isometric perspective, sometimes it doesn't run, but sometimes it does. So I don't know. Generally, it's going to work in a floor plan. That's why I was in a floor plan. Let's do this one, filled region areas.
Actually, just to, on that last slide, there's one thing that we actually stumbled on yesterday in my advanced workshop, is that if you literally have a thing selected inside Revit, like let's say you click on the title block inside Revit, and you leave it like that and you run the script actually won't run unless you hit escape. So you got to make sure that nothing's selected inside Revit for the actual Dynamo script to actually execute. You may think that there's something wrong with the Dynamo side. It's the fact that Revit's not allowing it to execute until you escape the command, just so you know.
I've seen that. So what we're going to do, I'm going to do the next one. We're maybe adding a little bit more detail as we go here, just to explain the task. Sometimes, if you're an architect, you might encounter this. You need to know how much exposed area, like exposed fire area, or is it protected from fire or unprotected? And then you need to provide a ratio of unprotected areas like glass and stuff like that to the department, the building department, and do like a little chart on that. And then they'll tell you how much glass you can have on that side of the building. So that's kind of in Revit. There is a Dynamo script graph which will do that kind of in a clever way, but it's not perfect in its calculation because Revit only calculates the center of walls, not the faces of walls in the area. So building departments come back to you and say, it's not quite right. So you have to use filled regions for now, unless someone's figured something else out. So here we go. I'm going to do this in 2 steps. I've outlined the steps in the handout, so you'll be able to work through this. The first note is this. I'm going to run, I think I'll just try this, step 1 from here. That's my recent files. Yeah, that's fine. So that's not a lot of nodes, but just to give you a basic explanation, it's finding the elevations, and it's saying, okay, if it's the east elevation, just make another view and add the word exterior to that. Or it could be fire separation or whatever. Then apply a view template that I pre-made called wall area. And so you're just making views and applying templates. It does a great job of that. So when I run that, huge time saver, in my opinion. So now instead of just having to go through here and draw filled regions on like a real view that's on a page or on a sheet, I have this other one that I can do it on. And to save time, I have pre-made the filled regions, and I'm dropping it on like that, and then I'm going to ungroup it. So you'll have the same in your files if you want to work with this. And I'm going to zero out these factors. So what we have is someone really just clicked around the exterior where there's exposed areas to unprotected fire, and then these are what we call unprotected areas. So the stage is set. Now we run Dynamo, and we're going to be taking the area from the filled region and putting it into one filled region. So we're going to take this big one, divide it by this one, and we're going to get a percentage of areas. Enough explaining. Let me just do it. So new, and yeah, I'll set that to manual. And this is really, I really like this node when I first saw it. I click on model, and then I click select model element. It allows you to reach in and pick something from the screen. It's nice, especially when you're just getting started, taking your initial steps. So we got it. Now I go to get parameter. There's the element. And what's the parameter name? That was a string. I'm going to double click and put it in quotes. So that is area with a capital A, because that's how it's spelled exactly right here. So if I go up to here, it's spelled with a capital A, area, and there's the factor. So I made these parameters in Revit, and I made an exposed area, unprotected area, and then the percentage of the two. So those are all going to get filled out, I hope. Okay, so there's the first one. If I run it, let's see what we got. Yeah, we got something. So it's there. Let's try writing that to those parameters. So I'm going to do set evil twin of get. And there we go. Element. That's the element. Right there, not that. That's the element. So now I'm going to set the parameter. What's the parameter name? I know this because I've practiced it, but it's the exposed area or wall area or whatever you want to call that. And then I plug that into the value. So now I'm going to run it. And right there, it's taken that and plugged it into there. Even if that's all you remember from this, you're far ahead because you can make a detail schedule, and then that will be one of the parameters that's in the schedule. So you can schedule areas of filled regions, which is kind of nice. You probably knew that already. So I'm going to go here to unprotected area. So I'm going to take this right here and put that onto there. So it's the same thing. Like I just go like that, Control C, Control V. You know, I'd want to probably rename some of these nodes and make groups just to make it clearer, but in interest of time, I'm just going to delete everything. Okay, I'll just delete that one. Remember, you can consolidate nodes. It's the same name. I'm not typing it twice. So there we go. I got to change the element. It's reading the same element, so I'm going to change. Click that. Let's run that again. There we go. Tons of zeros. We'll talk about that after. Okay, so there it is. Now we're going to set that parameter onto the unprotected area. So it's the same element. I'm just putting it all onto one filled region. And this is going to be called unprotected area. The spaces, everything has to be the same. Plug that in there, run it. Okay, so let's just confirm. There we go. So now we have two things in there. Maybe you want to export that to Excel. You could do that. We're not going to quite yet. We're going to try to keep it in Revit for now. I find keep it in Revit as long as you can. As soon as you start exporting, importing, things get a little, the workflow gets a little disjointed. Okay, we're not going to do math. Dynamo is going to do math. So I'm going to press divide, and I'm going to divide this number by this number. So just to recap, that's sort of the big area, that's the small area, and we're dividing the two to get the percentage. And then we're going to times that by 100. It's just the way I'm doing it. You don't have to do it exactly this way, but we're taking that number, dividing one by the other, and then timesing it by 100 to get sort of a, yeah, there it is right there. So it's probably small for you to see, but it's 29% is not protected from fire. Okay, now we just have to write that parameter. So a lot of getting and setting, a lot of cutting and pasting so far. The value, I'm going to undo that, and this is unprotected area percentage. That's what I wanted, and then that's the percentage. So when I run that, now I have right there. So it's a little bit close, like 29 and 29. If I were to just change that and then run it again, remember, once you teach a computer to do something once, it knows it forever. So I don't need to rewire anything. It's just done, 21%. And you could technically have that running live, and a designer could be like pushing and pulling and seeing, am I getting close to my setback?
And this is where I would actually use this and put it into my library. So for the next project, I don't have to rebuild this graph for the next time. It's already there.
Okay, I'm going to do one more thing. So that's all I needed for that script or graph. I'm using those words interchangeably. Just one more thing. My schedule, right now its facing direction says 0. In the scripts that I've given you, in the graphs that I've given you, the second graph, the step 2, all you need to do is put on the filled regions and call them by the right name, and it'll find out what elevation they're in, and it'll fill out all the data for you, and fill out that schedule. So it's more automated, but you can do it like this as well. So if I just typed in east, I mean, I can do that. That's okay. If I go back here to the chart, essentially, now it says east. There's your exposed area, your unprotected area, and your percentage of areas that you can submit to your building department. So that's the final kind of hands-on example that we were going to do. Let's just review some of the points from there. When you're searching, spaces do matter. So if you type in get space parameter, doesn't find it. I don't know why, but it just doesn't. If you type get parameter with all together as one, it finds it. It's the first one on the list. So you get to know those. There's a few of them, and we've included those in the glossary. This is just a time saver. You can double click to make what's called a code block. And if you just type a number, just start typing, that'll be the number. If you need a string, like floor finish parameter, you put it in those quotation marks. Let's talk about Dynamo Packages. What are they? They're kind of like a whole collection of graphs that, I'm using this a lot, I hope I'm not killing it, but geniuses have made. And they really are smart and really generous to share all this work that they've done. What you do is in Revit, in Dynamo, you go up, I'll just point to it, you go up here, search for package, and then you type in what you're looking for. This is a handy suggestion. You can sort by download. You'll find the top ones that are downloaded. Those are usually the best ones.
Yeah, just grab the top 10 and you pretty much have 90% of the stuff that other people are using. So if you're sharing graphs with each other, you won't have any issues.
Yeah. So Archilab Grimshaw, amazing. Thank you to Conrad who made all of those. But he has one called Get All Views. And what that does is it gets all the views really simply. And that's how you can do, let's say, the elevations. You can get all the elevations really quick. You can use that and then print that. Like there's lots of things that can domino effect of usefulness. Rhythm, again, thank you to the creator of that. Get and set parameter. I didn't tell you, but you know that get and set? It only really works for instance parameters. For type parameters, it gets weird. So if you use this one, get and set, and it's called type or instance in brackets, it doesn't matter. You just get whatever parameter you want and set any parameter you want.
Just so you know, it can be done onto a type parameter, but there's just a little more work involved than what we just showed you today.
Yeah. Don't like work. Okay, clockwork. This is awesome. Element location. If you want to find the location of a property line, location of a wall, and then maybe find the distance between the two, you need that. It's great. It finds the lines that the wall makes and everything. So those are great. Another little handy trick here is once you've got them, you've got the packages, you can go to this, you right-click and you go show root directory to their installed packages, and it has a whole bunch of samples that you can go through and check out, and that'll help you get your
This is a good segue for yesterday's workshop. So downloading the package manager, it has tons of extras. A lot of stuff that went over my head, but it's worth exploring yourself. So it's called AU Workshop 2016, something like that. I think if you actually go to the workshop right now, it'll be on the top of your list.
We're going to do another quick segue here. We're going to take questions in just a few minutes. Dynamo Terms, this is one of the biggest things to get over. I've included kind of a beginner glossary like curve. What is a curve? Well, it's a line, it's an arc. What is a double? Look, it's a number. So I've included some of those in your handout.
Oh, dictionary.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, the Dynamo Forum just released a dictionary for all the Dynamo stuff out there. And the cool thing about that is that it actually gives you definition. It does a screenshot of an example of how to use the node, and also gives an example of the node, like in an actual Dynamo script. So I haven't really gone in there myself personally. I kind of scanned through it, but it seems like a lot of useful information. And there's one other thing I want to mention is that Dynamo is open source, so you could actually, contribute to the Dynamo forum as well. You create your own nodes and post it, and people could download your stuff as well, just so you know.
So we've also included in the glossary common node combinations. So like kind of those riffs that you do. We've included a bunch of those that are very common things that you can adapt to your own uses. Also, as part of your downloads, there's more elaborate versions of what we did today. So I'm going to just focus on that one. There's one with a z-slope so that you can give it an angle. Just a heads up on that. For some reason, it's very slow in the new version of Dynamo. So that there's lots out there, and you can, from the advanced ones that Haney was just talking about, there's different versions of that exact node. So there's a number of these that you can work with. So really, that's the presentation so far. Really want to thank Autodesk, a company that I work for, SolidCAD, and the company that owns the company I work for, Cancel, and also the great people here at the Venetian and Palazzo. Thank you very much for putting on a great event and taking care of every detail. Of course, thank you very much for attending and listening. So we're going to move on now to our question period. Also, please fill out your survey when you're done. So we'll open up the floor to questions if there are any. There's a microphone if you want to go up to it, or I can repeat your question. Yes, sir. Question was, is there a way to change the default of run and manual to manual all the time? And if you don't mind, I think I know the answer to this one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is yes. When you first open Dynamo, I'll just open it right now and show you. I don't know if yes is a good enough answer, but you can.
Usually is. But.
It's like, yeah, it's fine. But it's right, where is that? You can say open.
If you go to open, yeah, it's right.
Oh, right here. So I'm just going to point to that. Open in manual execution mode.
But as for a new graph, I'm not too sure because we're opening something right now.
Oh, like just
a
the
new
start.
one.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the first thing you should do is actually set the manual.
Yeah.
Because I'm not too sure if there's a way. If there is, I'm not aware of it.
Thank you for your question. Yes.
Mine's not really a question, it's really kudos. The whole concept of starting from the endpoint and working backwards just changed the whole thing for me, the struggle.
Yeah, definitely. Because I was going from left to right. Because,
This is when I really want
right?
to repeat the.
Oh, sorry, the
Especially since
question,
it was
or the
phrased,
comment.
so.
Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, he was really saying that the concept of starting from the end, like the result, like the wall, and then working backwards was really eye-opening and the best thing he's ever seen in his life. So
That's what we got.
like kind of paraphrasing.
That's funny. All right.
More questions if you dare.
I do have a question for you guys. Show of hands. Who's actually used Dynamo before?
Oh, man.
Who's used Dynamo on an actual live project? Good, good. All right.
Okay. Yes, a question right there, Mike.
Can we get the Dynamo for older version of Revit or
Can we get Dynamo for older versions? Yes.
up to what version?
15,
Okay.
I don't think that's absolute, but 15, I've seen it running on 15.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah?
When you pulled levels into Dynamo and you had that list, if you change the names of the levels in Revit, would it update in the Dynamo project as well?
So the question was, if you bring the levels in and then you change the levels in Revit, will it change in Dynamo? That's the question. Yes, it will. So you would have to press run again.
No, you don't even have
You don't?
No.
Okay.
And
It will automatically.
And to add to that, also, if you have a family type list as well, change the name of the family, it will automatically update in Dynamo as well. So it's not just levels, it's reading all the information inside the actual Revit model live. But in order to execute the Dynamo or Dynamo graph, you have to hit run if it's set to manual.
Yeah, another question.
Or a comment?
Not that I have a good example of this, but does Dynamo interact with anything else other than Excel?
Does Dynamo interact with anything else other than Excel?
The answer is yes. It communicates with a lot of tools out there. Right now, we're experimenting with Rhino, which is information from Grasshopper that's ported into Revit. Then you bring into Grasshopper, Dynamo, Revit. You could use Excel. There's this new tool called Flux, which is a cloud-based solution where it's the interoperability between SketchUp, Rhino, Revit, I think AutoCAD as well.
I just want to add to that. We were talking about this earlier. Dynamo works with AutoCAD today, right?
Correct, yes. And
Works
it
with
also,
AutoCAD.
yes, and Dynamo.
AutoCAD, Excel.
Right, and within the
Civil.
ecosystem of Autodesk,
well.
it performs with Maya, with, what's that, Formit. Dynamo works with Formit, Maya, and some other, there's a list of softwares under Autodesk that performs with Dynamo as well. But we use it for Revit right now, mainly.
Yes.
You had mentioned that when you save Dynamo file and then run them using your Revit program, then when you start again, it'll run on those original entries. You just rename the file, will that take care of that?
Oh, that's okay. Question was, a Dynamo graph will run on a file, like a particular file. Let's say the Auditorium Seating one that we did, and it remembers those objects. Can we get it to forget those objects by renaming the AutoCAD file? The Dynamo file. Or the AutoCAD, or I mean the Revit file. I meant.
I don't know if you noticed when we actually used the chair as an example, it actually grabbed the element ID of the actual chair.
Yeah.
The element ID number is what communicates with Revit and Dynamo. So renaming of the file won't disconnect the communication. If you actually, let's say you cut and paste that chair, it will take on a new number, and that's where it would actually lose communication with each other.
So we still have a couple more minutes. Questions at the back, please? If you don't mind, if you could
Yell it.
either yell it or go to the mic. Don't want to make you walk all that distance, but
Before the time's up.
it might just be easier to do that.
I hope, okay.
Hi.
I guess I just had a follow-up question on your Excel to Revit and Dynamo. So when we used hardwood as to assign, material, can you do that with finishes and materials along with updating your schedules all together?
So I'm just reflecting back the question. We exported stuff
Right.
to Excel, but you're
Right.
thinking, well, what if we just make a schedule and export that to Excel?
Right.
Yeah?
No, I'm saying, like, you
Or
had your
connect
Excel,
it.
like you said, you have people who don't use Revit and don't use Dynamo, and then they give you all the information in an Excel sheet. Now, we said hardwood, and if you had a material in your Revit which was already assigned value of hardwood in your material category as well as your schedule now. So if you bring the script in a manner that it assigns the room with the value as well as the floor material gets the material. I don't know.
I'm going to say yes to that because
Okay.
what I'm hearing is using Dynamo to write information to different things
Right.
in Revit at the same time.
Exactly.
Absolutely, that's one of the powers is you can say, like we could have written that floor finish
Uh-huh.
to area objects
Okay.
and room objects and something else all at the same time.
Okay.
But it's just the name, it doesn't actually change the material of the floor.
Okay, if we're just talking, yeah, good question. So comment was, we just changed the name of the material or the name of the finish.
Right.
We weren't really changing the material.
Right.
If you want to change the material, you can do that as well. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And
Thank
then, yeah, so you could have that kind of holy grail of everything interoping. Yep.
And the one takeaway I'm getting from this is that If someone asks me a question,
By live stream.
if someone asks me a question, Dynamo has probably been the only software out there where my default answer is yes. Even though I'm not confident I could do it, I'm pretty confident Dynamo could do it. It's just the limitation of the software is me, really, because I just don't have enough knowledge to actually able to do it with the software. But I'm pretty sure the actual Dynamo software can do it.
I would
Thank
just
you.
add to that too, that's true, that it can do sort of anything, but when you're using it, you're going back and just trying to do simple things. Keep your sites fairly honed in on maybe one process, one process at a time, because if you really want to do something high-end, complex, it might pay off just to contact a programmer to help you with that.
Or us.
I'm not saying Dynamo is bad or anything like that. It can do almost anything, but there are, there's professional tools, and then there's the tools for me, the non-genius, and that's sort of what Dynamo is positioning itself as.
And all kidding aside, I'm not a genius myself, and I just picked it up. It's because I felt like there was value into this. It pays dividends down the road. It streamlined a lot of processes in my office, and I'm very thankful Dynamo or Autodesk was able to introduce this tool to us. It made my life a lot. It made it fun, actually. It's sort of a hobby of mine now. I'm sitting in front of my TV and creating scripts. That's just one of my. I know it's sad, but that's my reality. So, yeah.
So we're a little bit over time. We don't want to keep you from your next sessions. So thank you very much for attending, and enjoy the rest of AU. Thanks a lot.